your host, and I'm the Clinical Community Outreach Social Worker for Hope House Memphis in Memphis, Tennessee. And we are here today to learn all about HIV prevention and ways that we can crush stigmas within our own communities. Last time we took a look at what stigma looks like, as well as discrimination and how it affects people living with HIV and AIDS. And if you missed those videos, don't worry, you can always go back on our YouTube page at Hope House Memphis to catch back up. But while I got you here, let's jump into today's session on language. So why is it important to talk about language? Well, first of all, words and language help us to express how we feel. It shows how we perceive ourselves and how we perceive the world. It defines our life experiences. It helps us explain our memories to other people, and gives us a foundation for the stories that we pass on to our families. One word can make our day better, and it also has the power to destroy our self-esteem. Language inspires us, it encourages us, it brings hope, it brings joy, it brings peace, it brings love. It's just a very powerful tool, and this is why it matters. This is why we have to discuss it, because with the power of our tongues, we can be the reason somebody feels accepted by society or why they feel rejected by society. So let's look at how HIV-related stigma and discrimination factor into language. Well, since the beginning of time, language has reinforced certain beliefs, including oppressive thoughts. This is seen in the workplace as powerful women are seen as too aggressive or unapproachable, whereas men are seen as hardworking and ambitious. Men who cry at times are deemed weak and feminine, and people living with mental illnesses are deemed as crazy and unstable, right? But stack these stigmatizing beliefs on top of an HIV diagnosis, and you have more discrimination and oppression that can lead to an attack on a person's quality of life. As we learned in prior videos, we already know that people living with HIV are already stigmatized due to their diagnosis, but language can magnify these negative beliefs. Stigma can lead to discriminatory practices such as job loss, poor treatment in the healthcare community, rejection from family and friends, and feelings of hopelessness as well as worthlessness. It may also affect prevention measures as people living with HIV become more afraid to be tested, to share their diagnosis with their partner, and may stop taking their HIV medications, leaving them open to other potential illnesses, all because of these stigmatizing beliefs that are thrown around the community. So, how do we begin to challenge our stereotypical language to be more inclusive of those living with HIV? Well, let's take a look at the Denver Principles. So the Denver Principles came about in 1983 when a group of HIV advocates came together to change derogatory language that they were hearing about the HIV population. POZ, a magazine for individuals living with HIV, states that the Denver Principles are a self-empowering manifesto that hopes to challenge people to use person-centered language over stigmatizing language when discussing topics related to HIV. It recognizes that people living with HIV and AIDS are not their diagnosis, therefore we cannot describe them as such. So let me give you some examples so that you can fully understand this principle of person-centered language. So thinking about somebody who's been diagnosed with cancer, you're never going to say the words, he or she is cancer, right? And with somebody who experiences seizures, you're never going to say he or she is seizures. These statements would describe that person as a product of their illness and doesn't identify their identity up front. So instead, we would say, he or she has been diagnosed with cancer, or he or she had seizures. That is person-centered language. We're putting that person's identity before their illness. So let's practice this with HIV and AIDS. An example of this was provided by the Wells Project that had an article on language matters, which you can look up online if you're interested in checking that out. I'll also link it below, but it has some great examples. But one I want to pull for you right now is saying that we saw an HIV person today. Saying that statement is not person-centered language. We're putting the virus before that person's identity. So that's not what we want to do. We want to put that person before their illness. So instead we can say, Today, I met someone who was living with HIV. That's person-centered language. We're putting that person before their illness. Their identity is more important than their illness. One last example we can give you is describing a child who was just born into life from a mother who has been diagnosed with HIV. So doctors who are not using person-centered language, or a person who's not using person-centered language, would say that that child is HIV exposed. That's not person-centered language. We instead would say this child was exposed to HIV. This way we're putting that person's identity before their illness. You think you got it? Is it making sense? If not, please contact me or let me know below and we can go over it a little bit more. It does take time to rearrange your wording to make sure you're using more person-centered language. However, person-centered language is something that we need not only within the HIV community, but also within other communities as well, such as the LGBTQ community, the mental health community, and also to describe people living in low-income areas. So, I have a challenge for us to try. Because practice makes perfect, I want you to go out and practice using person-centered language this week when speaking with family and friends. Take time to acknowledge your thoughts prior to speaking, recognize any possible phrases that might need to be challenged, and try focusing on using person-centered language. Also, try to share this idea and this video, if you don't mind, with your friends and family as well, so they too can practice the skill with you. I will link extra resources about this topic below, and as always, you can contact me directly by email or by phone to get more information on this topic, on HIV in general, for any questions or concerns, and also information on testing, treatment, and prevention options. And that's all I have for you today. Thank you for joining us again in the Prevention Convention, and remember, knowledge is power. See you next time. Bye.